Oh, microphone check. 1, 2. What is this? It's B. Michael here with Shifting Paradigms Business. We're live, man. January 2, 2023. We've been on a dart, you know what I'm saying? Just flying through this space and time. But want to definitely welcome you all to Paradigms. I'm your host, B. Michael. We're live here on KUAW, Knowledge, Understanding, and Wisdom Radio, brought to you by the Black Family Technology Awareness Association at the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center, where, you know, gets done with the youth. You know, you got some good tutoring programs. You have a great robotics program. You got some great quality services for young people that, you know, takes place, you know, around the clock. And so definitely want to shout that out for what is being done there with the Du Bois Learning Center. Tonight, though, I'm going to wax a little philosophical, not that I don't usually, but, you know, I want to wax philosophical for the 2023 and really present a paradigm that is so important for us to take into account. And this is dealing with the idea of truth, you know, and we are at such interesting juncture of time where the truth is something that is really being disregarded. It's been trampled on. It has been really expelled from our society, you know, and it's so interesting when we think about it because we now have this theory, and I spoke about this several weeks ago, this theory of relativity that started off as a scientific explanation for time, right? And how things are relative to their position in orbit, so to speak, you know, and their motion, the rate of motion, things of that nature, and it related to time. And Einstein brought in this fourth dimension, time, that completely revolutionized science, where you had, you know, some basics that were there prior to, you had gravity, you know, space, motion, and, not motion, space, motion, and matter. So those three, if I'm not mistaken, were like the three major premises of science at that time. And then Einstein brought in the fourth dimension of time, which rocked the whole scientific world. But eventually what happened was his theory was co-opted into a political science, if you will, and things then became more relative as relates to morality, okay? And this is so interesting when we take this really into a full expanded idea, okay? So, and I'll present this notion here, whereas you're dealing with more of a Torah-based, biblical-based mindset. The idea of truth is intrinsic. It goes within, or without saying, the idea of truth in more spiritually minded cultures and civilizations goes without saying, right? It's just something that is understood, that there's a standard, there's a truth, there is the truth that is something that society is supposed to be accountable to in order for its order and conduct to reach its optimal state of being, right? As human beings and what our purpose is as humans, okay? But prior to I would like to call it, I was just taking some notes, the Edenic expulsion in terms of getting expelled from Eden, Adam and KUAW had a consciousness. And they did not know at that time of the moral relativism of good and evil, right? They had an innocent mind. What Adam and KUAW, I propose, understood was they knew truth, they knew falsehood, they knew reality, they knew illusion. That's all that they knew. That's all that they needed to know. They needed not know more than that. That's all that they needed to know, right? What was true and what was real. Because from there, everything can be deduced. You can kind of make sense of everything after you conclude and discern and even make the necessary discrimination that this is true and this is not, right? This is real and this isn't. And so when we can make that distinction, then we can really understand how to best live life. In fact, we're told by the words of the one who's known as the Nazarene, the Messiah, Yeshua, son of Joseph, says that you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free, right? But what is the freedom that we're being set free from? And this is the freedom from illusion. This is the freedom from falsehood. This is the freedom from things that lead you ultimately to your demise and your death. And the truth is what will liberate you and bring you into a dimension of life, a dimension of light, a dimension of reality, a dimension of like existence that the world is craving for, believe it or not. Everybody's in pursuit of something, from love to truth to whatever, but there's a standard, there's an ultimate revelation. And that's the main point I wanted to make, even dealing with Adam and Hawa, is that they had revelational knowledge, right? Something that science seeks to pursue, the truth. Science, when you get to the raw meaning and purpose of science, it is to uncover the truth. That's the whole purpose of science. Politics, on the other hand, because this is where we're going to see this schism take place, where the absolute and the relative completely, are divided. Not knowing absolute truth and relative truth, they can coincide. They can actually enforce one another, because we have to have a relative experience. But the point that I'm making is the political science of the day, going back to probably the 50s, maybe even the 60s, threw in this theory of relativity into the political arena, and therefore made society become less qualitatively moral. The ethics of society completely got thrown out the window. Interesting, I had a conversation with my grandfather some time ago, and he was saying that, asking, what, you've been alive since the 30s, so you've seen a lot change, power to him still being alive, driving and walking around, all praises to the Most High. But he said he started to see things change in like the 50s. The 50s is when he said sex education get brought into the schools. Of course, he does have children that were in school at that time, but he was a teacher, so he saw this as well, right? He started seeing and hearing music that was a little more promoting of loose behavior, right? And then, of course, it just becomes reflective in society. Does art reflect society? Does society reflect art? And they go hand in hand again. Same thing with relative and absolute truths, but we have to understand there's always a standard. There's always a higher principle that establishes the basis for everything. There has to be an archetype even to everything that is in existence. There has to be something that is the mold, that is the die, if you will, that sets the pattern and the paradigm into existence in motion, right? So when we understand that and how everything has a cause, we can see that there is something that establishes an order, something that establishes a principle that will allow it to, proceed in the right manner, to be carried forth in the right manner. And so I want to start with this article. It's a very interesting article. It's from the Financial Times, interestingly. It was written back in 2007 by John Kay. And the article says science is the pursuit of truth, not consensus. Not consensus. This is in the UK. This is an article that was covering some events that had taken place in Britain. And it says Michael Strage's comment on politics and science struck a raw nerve and provoked an extended response from the president of the UK's Royal Society. Lord Rees advocates that we should base policy on something called the scientific consensus, right? The scientific consensus, while acknowledging that such consensuses may be provisional. But this proposal blurs the distinction between politics and science that Lord Rees wants to emphasize. There is a blur, there is a division that is being breached, if you will, between politics and science. And Rees wants to emphasize this. Novelist Michael Christian may have exaggerated when he wrote that if it's consensus, it's not science. If it's science, it's not consensus, but only a bit. Consensus is a political concept, not a scientific one. That's so important to really ruminate on and chew on right there, because when you understand that politics is the art of relationship, and you want to make relationship with individuals and avoid war, but still accomplish the goal of war, which is to win the hearts and minds of the people, right? And so politically, if you are as diplomatic as possible, You want to gain consensus, right? That's what politics does. Science, on the other hand, it doesn't care about consensus. Science is empirical evidence. Science is the use of knowledge gained through observation to arrive at the truth. That's what science really is. The use of knowledge, the use of data, right? Gained from observation. This is just what I'm putting together. This is my definition. In order to arrive at the truth. And so when you understand what science does, it doesn't care about what people collectively think and say. No, this is what this is. Gravity, you gonna jump off that building, you're done. Oh, I don't think so. You think so? No, I don't think so. We can fly. Okay, go ahead, jump off the building and see which one has consensus, right? So this is where we have to really rationalize things. And we have lost our sense of reason because we are now so politically informed and scientifically just destitute when it comes to knowledge. And I'm not everyone, let me say, but our society we're predominated by a program designed by engineers, social engineers, that is taking away critical thinking. And this is what shifting paradigms is all about. I didn't mention the mission, but again, we stimulate critical thought in order to realistically redefine our narrative and positively reshape our reality through dialogue with self-determination. Kuji Chagalia. Kwanzaa just passed too, so we had a great Kwanzaa celebration down at the Gym Theater. Was there a few nights, and always good to see community out in force, supporting culture, supporting history, consciousness. So it was a good turnout. It was a good turnout, some good events. Nonetheless, again, consensus is a political concept, not a scientific one. Consensus, listen to this, it finds a way through conflicting opinions and interests. So we can find a middle ground somewhere, right? Consensus is arrived when the outcome of discussion leaves everyone feeling they have been given enough of what they want. We want to make sure everybody's satisfied, right? The process of proper science could hardly be more different. The accomplished politician is a negotiator, a conciliator, finding agreement where none seem to exist. The accomplished scientist is an original, an extremist, disrupting established patterns of thought. That's what science does, because it's arriving at absolute truth. That's what it's seeking. It's what it's seeking to actually present. Good science involves perpetual, open debate in which every objection is aired and dissents are sharpened and clarified, not smoothed over. Often, the argument will continue forever and ever, and should, because the objective of science is not agreement on a course of action, but the pursuit of truth, right? So this is where I want to really open this particular conversation, if you will, up. If anybody does want to call in, definitely can call. Well, they can't call in today, but you can actually, leave your notes, leave your comments on the page. For all our listeners, I want to thank you all for tuning in as we're dealing right now with Truth Paradigmatics here on Shifting Paradigms from KUAW Radio. And so we're just, going over the difference between absolute and relatives right now. Right? So this is so important to really capture and understand in our day and times, because we're dealing with a whole lot of challenges that are allowing agendas and programs to run blatantly to misguide, mislead, deceive, and beguile, particularly our children, right? And so we got to make sure our children are steeped and rooted in the truth so that they can actually know how to navigate these waters, right? And maintain our cultural consciousness, maintain our historical alignment to who we are as a people. Because we're deviating from that path, and that's the intent. When you get into a melting pot, as opposed to like a mosaic, the melting pot is assimilating everybody into one glob, to one substance, right? And that's not what this is really about. This is about really knowing who you are and living your life according to your cultural consciousness and historical consciousness. And that's what was clipped from so many so-called African Americans, so many so-called Negroes, so many so-called Black people, but this awakening is taking place. And this is also about the truth, relative and absolute, right? This is very much a matter of dealing with the truth, right? And looking at the signs, looking at, and I wrote this down earlier, it's so important to understand and distinguish that as relates to truth, you can look at universals. There's things that are universally accepted, right? There's things that no matter what you do, water is water, right? You may call it aqua, you may call it mayim, you may call it, whatever the word is in that particular language, but we know that that hydrogen, two hydrogen, oxygen atom substance is thirst quenching. It's necessary, right? It's vital to our being. We know that. We know that fire is fire. We know the elements are the elements. Well, no matter what we call them, we know that there are universals that are presented. We know that there are patterns in existence that we see. We notice that we all share the same nature as human beings, and we all have the same needs, right? There's patterns that we see in that. We see cycles in time that lend to let us know that there's an absolute truth to this matter. I am absolutely a human being, right? Despite all the consensus politically that was present at one point in time in history that said otherwise. No, you're 3/5 of human. You're almost human. You're not quite, but we are human beings and we know this. In fact, we know we are the original human beings. We know this. We know that our ancestors go back millions of years, right? In South Africa, which they have the, what do they call it? The single cradle theory. It may be a theory, but it's a law. It's a scientific pursuit of knowledge that lets us know there was one organism that gave birth to one human, organism that gave birth to all of humanity. They call it the one cradle theory, I believe. I don't want to sound too bad. Say that again. No, what is it? Let me see. Yeah, yes, it's one cradle theory and a two cradle theory. So one cradle theory is something that our ancestor Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese scientist, presented as well. The single origin theory of humans. Okay, that's what it deals with, the single origin theory of humanity, right? And so when you look at all the science and you look at all the DNA that's been collected, it goes back to what they call the genetic Eve. The genetic Eve, and they all trace all cells of every human alive today back to an African woman. So they trace all the cells of humanity, all the different lines and ethnicities that have come about, nationalities, so on and so forth. Everyone shares the same DNA as the genetic Eve. I believe that's the name of her. The mitochondrial Eve, excuse me. It is the mitochondrial Eve. She's the matrilineal, most recent common ancestor of all living humans. It goes back to one African woman. Some call her Dinknesh, some call her Lucy, right? But this is the oldest ancestor of humans that goes back, that they can trace all lines to, okay? But it's so interesting when we look at this theory of relativity, though. I just want to take a look at some of this. And there's an article from the science website called Ligonier. It's called Relativism in the Modern Age, right? So it talks about the intellectual revolution. This was written by Albert Mohler. He says the intellectual revolution that's shaping American culture began in some sense with 4 lectures presented to the Prussian Academy of Sciences in the late 1915. Lectures were given by Albert Einstein, who before the end of the year would publish his argument for a general theory of relativity. Those lectures launched an intellectual revolution, and Einstein's theory of relativity is essential to understanding our modern age. The 100th anniversary of a scientific theory is not necessarily a matter of great cultural importance. Einstein had developed his special theory of relativity a decade earlier, but his general theory, his special theory, extended to the entire cosmos, is breathtaking in its revolutionary power. Einstein replaced the world of Newtonian physics with the new world marked by 4 dimensions instead of only 3. Time added as a 4th dimension changed everything. This was the article that I was reading here. So he says Einstein summarized his theory in these words. He says the principle of relativity in its widest sense is contained in the statement, the totality of physical phenomena is of such a character that it gives no basis for the introduction of the concept of absolute motion, or shorter but less precise, there is no absolute motion. So he was referring this mainly to motion, time, right? Thus, time, matter, and energy are relative and not absolute. Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor Thomas Levinson recently called Einstein's theory the greatest intellectual accomplishment of the 20th century. The Economist, marking the centennial of Einstein's lectures, called the general theory of relativity one of the highest intellectual achievements of humanity. It is no exaggeration to claim Einstein's theory as the very foundation of modern cosmology, the study of the cosmos and how things are ordered. It's pretty much a study of order. And yet, most modern people, even well-educated moderns, have little idea of the actual theory or of its scientific significance. In everyday life, Newtonian physics serves us very well. Cosmologists may depend on Einstein's theory in their daily work, but few do. So the cultural impact of Einstein's theory extends far beyond the laboratory or the science classroom. As the 20th century unfolded, this is where it gets deep, Einstein's theory of relativity quickly became a symbol and catalyst for something very different, the development of moral relativism. So prior to 1915, moral relativism was not really a matter to be the debate. There was no debate, so to speak, right? People were pretty clear on what was real, what was not, what was true, what was false. They had a pretty basic idea, even though the judgment was off, right? Even though they had some very misinformed like judgments about who was who and what was what in terms of dealing with chattel slavery, right? That was a very hypocritical matter to really deal with during this particular age. And even Jim Crow, it's just unjust. When justice is not present, when the absolute scale of justice is not present, then you can see this is the result. You see the result of corruption, right? When the truth is not enforced, you have corruption. So that's what we can see the result of this. So again, moral relativism is, I would call it a bastardized notion from the theory of relativity. It's a bastardized notion. It doesn't even relate to what Einstein was talking about. But what you can do politically is use it to form consensus, right? It's about what you would call in this sense pragmatics. And how do we practically use this to gain advantage, promote the agenda that we have here to weaken the moral fabric of society so that we can control people? Because now people are more lewd, more crude, and not as prude as they should be, prudent, wise, homo sapien, a wise human. They're not human as much as they should be. That we can manipulate them and have them do what we want them to do. And that's why the needle of truth as relates to absolute and moral relative is so important. Because when you have a conviction, and I will even say a revelation, which what Adam had, again, going back to the garden, when you have the conviction of revelational knowledge, which is universal, that's the thing about consciousness. The Most High is not going to give you a different version of what, quote unquote, righteousness is, what holiness is, what purity and innocence is from the other one that he's going to reveal the same knowledge to. It's going to line up. You're going to have one mind. There's going to be one revealed reality to all those who have that consciousness, because that's how consciousness works, right? When it's spring in its hemisphere, it's spring in its hemisphere, right? Even though people try to manipulate and make sure that you can get a thunderstorm in the wintertime with no snow, and you can get 50, 60 days in the wintertime, in a region that's not typically, experiencing those particular climates, but you got people who can manipulate things and they can adjust it to how they want to adjust it. And that's the science that they understand and know, because they're using the principles of the science. Absolutely using the principles of the science. But we have to get wiser and understand how things work and know the standards. So again, Einstein's theory of relativity became a symbol and catalyst for something very different than what it was intended to explain, and that is the development of moral relativism. Einstein was not a moral relativist, nor did he believe that his theories had any essential moral or cultural meaning. It had nothing to do with that. He recoiled when his theory of relativity was blamed or credited for the birth of modern art, which is Cubism in particular, or any other cultural development. The philosopher Isaiah Berlin defended Einstein against any such charge. The word relativity has been widely misinterpreted as relativism, the denial or doubt about the object of truth or moral values. He continued, this was the opposite of what Einstein believed. He was a man of simple and absolute moral convictions and were expressed in all he was and did. Einstein observed the Torah, pretty much. Einstein was a Jewish man, okay? He was a Jewish man, okay? So he had a Torah-centered heart. He had a Torah-centered mind. But he had also a very scientific mind, which is what we should have as relates to dealing with Torah as well, to be truthful, right? And we'd come to much better conclusions about life and reality in this world if we had that type of mindset. So relatively shook from what science is really about. Again, the pursuit of knowledge, well, it is the acquisition of knowledge through observation for the purpose of arriving of the truth. That's what science is at its purest form. But what has happened is we've been so shook and misled to believe that science is something that is all negative and bad. It is completely the antithesis of what religion or spirituality is about. When again, just like absolute moral, just like political and scientific, these things should come together. When they become compartmentalized, and I will even use the word weaponized, well, they're going to be broken down and used compartmentally and categorically to use against the integrated mind, the mind that knows how to integrate what needs to be integrated, and the mind that knows how to segregate what does not need to be integrated. That's what the truth does for you. And so I just wanted to drop that article off because it's very interesting to note that his scientific treatise was meant to deal specifically with time. It was relative to time. It wasn't relative to art. It wasn't relative to philosophy. It wasn't relative to morality, which it has become attached with and used to justify, right? And so when we can start to see the root of this, you can start to then understand the force of these trans movements, right? And I'm not a hateful person at all. I do have, and I'm learning to do that much more. I have a hate for corruption. I have a hate for injustice. I have a hate for sin. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm learning to detest more and more because it's not a part of our paradigm. We are cosmic. We are cosmic. We are part of this cosmos, and we have a huge role to play in ordering this cosmos, particularly on this sphere that we've been given to take care of, called Earth. And the intent of us being placed on this earth is to bring a mindset, a consciousness to this earth, which is based on kingdom principles, in order to experience the fullness of life that this earth has to offer. Not only earth, but our source of life, our creator. Right? So these are things that we have to really learn how to take advantage of for the sake of our continuity as a people, as a human race. The only race that there is. There's no other race. So what is truth? We just talked about relativism. Well, let's look at what relativism is first. Let's take a look at what is relativism. Moral relativism, even more specifically, which says pretty much there is no truth. This is the question Pontius Pilate asked Yahushua ben Yosef, right? You know, he says, I come to bear witness to the truth. Pontius Pilate's like, well, what is the truth? If you don't know, you don't know, right? If you don't know, you don't know. So that's where you have to really start to go within. You know, this is where we have to start listening to all the talking heads that are about us and listening to the voice of the spirit, that small, soft, still voice in you that's going to connect you with so many more. The historical background through moral relativism, though moral relativism, did not become a prominent topic in philosophy or elsewhere until the 20th century. History, this is from Stanford Philosophy's website. It did not become an issue or topic prominently until the 20th century. It does have ancient origins, though. In the classical Greek world, both the historian Herodotus and the sophist Protagoras appeared to endorse some form of relativism. The latter attracted the attention of Plato in the Theaetetus. It should be noted that the ancient Chinese Taoist philosopher Zhuang Shi put forward a non-objectivist view that is sometimes interpreted as a kind of relativism. So among the Greek philosophers, moral diversity was widely acknowledged, but the more common non-objectivist reaction was moral skepticism. The view that there is no moral knowledge, the position that Pyrrhonian skeptic Sextus Empiricus, rather than moral relativism, the view that moral truth or justification is relative to a culture or society. So just kind of really pointing that out. I'm not going to go too deep in that, right? But it shows how significant this position has become historically in the 20th century, because prior to that, it wasn't a prominent topic, it said. It wasn't something that was just widely debated. It was pretty much understood, and you had distinct cultures, particularly in societies, that had no moral compass. Sky's the limit. Do as thou wilt will be the whole of the law. So you had societies where that was something that was typical. It was quite typical at times. And so with the 20th century, we see how now there is the invasion of, again, the mindset of anything goes, even though they said it has been in pockets, but now it is global. We have a global assault of this here. To the point I was talking with a colleague at a conference, and they were talking about how there's a school, and I believe it's in Kansas, that the children identify as cats. And during lunch, the school has to put their trays on the floor because they want to eat like cats. So there will be some issues that will arise because of how the children choose to identify. I'm like, where in the world they do that at? Like, for real, the school has to comply with that. You can put their food on the floor and they can eat from the floor. Like, how? How is this happening? But that's how people identify now. People have this, again, this trans mentality that we can identify anything politically, but scientifically, we refuse to accept and acknowledge the truth of who we are, biologically speaking. That science is refuted. It isn't even considered anymore. And this is how dangerous society now becomes. When science goes out the window and you just have the opportunity to be like, to identify whatever you want to identify, that is dangerous and satanic. Let's just be clear about it. That is an affront of the enemy. That is a tactic and strategy of the enemy to make anything what you want to make it, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So this is how this operates. We have to see this for what it is, and this is why, again, the truth is so important. In fact, this is an article from, again, Stanford Library of Philosophy on the truth. It says, the truth is one of the central subjects in philosophy. What is philosophy? The love of wisdom. It's so important for us as humans to understand, and I'm just going to use that, you know, the field of philosophy, because philosophy is the love of wisdom, and as human beings, that's what our pattern, that's what our signature is. Our signature is intended to be wisdom, and that's another witness of the truth. Signatures in creation. You see things that are signaturally, that have a signature that literally define, that's a new word, signaturally. You like that one, babe? That's a signature leaves its print and its design and authorship, authoritarianship, its authorhood. I'm just making up words right now. But it lets you know that this is the person that, or the being that actually designed this. And there's things in creation that clearly demonstrate that there are signatures that have been left on it, right? Parenthood, for one, right? That's a signature. And it becomes undeniable at times. So when you look at volcanic eruptions, what is the signature of volcanic eruptions? Well, you have the remnants of that, and one of those things are obsidian. Well, that's a signature that this volcano erupted here, and you see other things that are also left with it, right? But truth, again, one of the central subjects in philosophy, is also one of the largest. Truth has been a topic of discussion in its own right for thousands of years. Unlike moral relativism, that just became a major issue in the 20th century, truth has always been at the cutting edge of society and history for human beings. Moreover, a variety of issues in philosophy relate to truth, either by relying on theses about truth or implying theses about truth. It would be impossible to survey all there is to say about truth in any coherent way. Instead, the focus of this article here is the main themes in the study of truth in the contemporary philosophical literature, right? So the problem of truth, in a way, is easy to state. What truths are and what, if anything, makes them true. But this simple statement masks a great deal of controversy. Whether there is a metaphysical problem of truth at all, and if there is, what kind of theory might address it, are all standing issues in the theory of truth, right? So what is the truth and how do we identify it is pretty much what this all comes down to, right? Very interesting article there. But again, compared to moral relativism, truth and the idea of truth has been, and the topic of truth has been hot since, we can remember. As far back as human beings have really been able to pursue that, okay? Now, another matter is revelation. So I want to present this in because let me go here with revelation before I even open it up. Excuse me. In Isaiah 26, let me go to Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26, and I believe it is verse 2, but I'm going to read the first two verses. It says this: In that day, when the kingdom is established, this song is sung in the land of Judah, or Judea. We have a strong city. He sets up deliverance, walls, and ramparts. Open the gates. Let the righteous nation which guards the truth enters in. The one steadfast of mind, you guard in perfect peace, for he trusts in you. Trust in Yah forever, for in Yah, Yad-Heh-Wah-Heh, is a rock of ages. And so, verse 2 is the focus. Open the gates, let the righteous nation which guards the truth enter in. And so this is really about opening the gates of your consciousness. What gates do you have? You have eyes, you have ears, you have nose, you have mouth, right? You have skin, and you have a mind's eye. And that's the most important gate that you have to open when it comes to the perception of the truth. In fact, when you're dealing with the image of Yah, the image of Elohim, or the image of God, if you will, it is about perception. It is having the right perception. In fact, the ancient philosopher, well, I won't call him ancient, what was it? The 1100s. He's from the 1100s. His name is Moshe ben Maimon, known as Maimonides or Rambam. He was a Moorish Hebrew philosopher in Spain that died in Alexandria, Egypt. But he lets us know that the word Selim in Hebrew implies the essence of a thing, not a literal image, not a literal shape or figure, right? So when you're talking about, well, we made the image like as a God, that don't mean God has a literal image or has a literal form or shape. It's implying the essence of what this omnipotent, omniscient entity is about. This supreme intelligence, right? This intelligent energy. And so when you're dealing with the image of the Most High, you're dealing with the projection of the correct image of who you are in the Most High and the Most High in you. And you're also dealing with the perception of what is real and what is true, as opposed to what is false and illusory. That's what this is about. You're dealing with the image of the Most High. And so when you're opening the gates, you're opening your mind to allow the principle of righteousness to enter in, because why? You are a pursuer and a guardian of the truth, which is the revelation that Yah lives. Because the truth, according to the master, I know is Yahushua, and everyone who came before him in that line will tell you that the Torah, his word, is the truth. Now, is that a religious dogmatic stance? Some would argue, yes, it is. Some would argue so. But the way that this is supposed to work is not shoving it down people's throat. It's not holding a sword to their head, a gun to their head, if they don't convert to this particular way of life. That's not what this is about. This is about demonstration. This is about being a witness and showing the world, yes, righteousness can be achieved. Yes, justice can be achieved. Yes, peace can be achieved, because I'm a living witness. But what happens is when we collectively come together in the truth, and we have these standards that go beyond the arbitrary opinion and consensus of those who are sitting in the seat of scoffers and walking in the counsel of the ungodly, right? Walking in the way of sinners. Like, this is not what we're supposed to do. And moral relativism will further entrench us and ensnare us in that path if we allow it. And this is why it's essential that we pursue to know the truth. And even if it takes you going through your comparative religious studies, I've done it, it's a great investment of time. You have to also be able to keep your mind. Because I remember at one time when I was doing this, and this is when I was in college, I was a philosophy minor, and I was reading all these different traditional, religious traditions, to the point where I had no clue who I was invoking, who I was seeking, what face, what culture, what principle I was going to adhere to. I was completely flawless. But in so doing, it made me really understand that my culture is the lens that will allow for me to see the truth. My historical and cultural consciousness is what will allow for me to understand and make sense of what life is about, and help me to know what the truth is, and to pursue it, and to seek it, and to stand on it, and to be it, right? Like, that's the whole key there, is to be the truth. But again, I did present the notion of what Adam and Hawa had, and it's so interesting because this is how our technology works. I was talking with the missus earlier, and we were talking about the brain and talking about chakras, interestingly. But when you think of how the brain and the spinal cord works, and we were talking about this Sanskrit word, what is it? Sushumna, and it was mentioning the power of the spinal cord. It was talking about the spinal cord, and we were just discussing, and we were just saying how the spinal cord is like the power cord and the antenna to our Wi-Fi connection. And the brain is the CPU, where all the data and the information is housed, and the program is ran. But the connecting cord is that spine. In fact, that is what gives us our central nervous system. That's where all the autonomic and even the higher cerebral cognitive functions and capacities are housed, in the brain and the spine. And so when you look at that, that is pretty much the whole signature of intelligent design. Because the sperm cell carries the whole code that eventually does become your brain and your spine. If you look at a sperm cell and you look at the brain and the spine, you really can't say that it's not the growth of that inside that egg, right? That's the whole code. And so the point that I'm making, though, is Adam had a divine connection, a heaven connection with his mind with the Most High. That's how he was able to intuit, right? And that's a huge word, intuition. We can intuit things. You have erudition, which is the study of things by, just empirical data, knowledge, information. But you also have intuitive knowledge. And that's where meditation comes into it. That's where, dealing with even stretching and preparing yourself for being that open vessel of life to receive life and light, the light of consciousness, the light of the Most High into your being, so you can know what the truth is and be set free, as the scripture says, right? But divine revelation, according to Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, is a translation of the Greek word apocalypsis, which means the removal of a veil so that something can be seen. This is why the scripture said, open ye the gates. Open the gates, because our gates are veiled. We're distracted. We're diverted. We're not tapped in to. There's a book I'm reading that talks about the 99% reality. We're trapped in a 1% reality where we're just pretty much taught to see what we see. And so what's so interesting is Plato, when I was in philosophy, my favorite allegory was this allegory of the cave. The allegory of the cave has it as such, where there are men who are chained down in the cave and there's a fire behind them that's casting shadows on the wall that's before them. And the only contact they have with reality is from those particular images that someone behind them is casting on that wall before them. One of the people ends up breaking out of the chains and is going towards what he sees as light. And so when he gets to the opening of the cave, of course, he's greatly disturbed because this light, he's not adjusted to it, right? I can't perceive that, but when he actually adjusts to the light and goes out into the world, he's able to see for himself what life really is. He sees existence for the first time, reality. He sees reality for the first time. And now, because of that, I gotta go back and tell my brothers and sisters in this cave about there's so much more. But that's that 1% reality that we're trapped in, that media, right? Interestingly, I was talking about this the other day with Lady. Media is also a part of the name of the Medea Persians, back of ancient. And the Medea Persians, the Medes, if you will, were magicians. Many of them had a enticement to magic, if you will, right? They were manipulators. They used magic. The Magi, in fact, come from the ancient civilization of Medea Persia, right? And so the media is doing the same thing. It's just manipulating your mind using hypnosis. This is when you go into the beta waves. When you're watching television, you go into beta waves. That's why you can call somebody 4 or 5 times before they wake up and be like, oh, you talking to me? Because they're hypnotized. They're part of the program. And now that we've got you hypnotized, the power of suggestion is going to bang your subconscious, and we got you programmed. You're a moral relativist now. You don't even think about the truth. You're not even critically thinking because you're too busy entertained to even consider that there may be something greater than what you're being programmed to see on the idiot box, right? So it's a matter of waking up. But again, divine revelation means removal of the veil so that something can be seen. Open the gates. Open your gates. Clear yourself. Sometimes we got to break free from the matrix. You got to turn off the television. You got to turn off the music. Go put on some jazz or some meditative music, some solfeggio vibrations, frequency. Put that on. Listen to something that is just more mind elevating, right? Drink water, right? Eat healthy for like a week. Just go fruit veg, you know what I'm saying? Go fruit veg and then allow your gates to get clear and sit and be still. Sit your butt still and meditate and see what you get. And you can find that there is a truth that is dormant and latent in you. And so paradigmatically, truth or revelation refers to the alleged instances of divine speaking or special divine acts in history, although in a more general sense, revelation can denote any means of divine self-disclosure, for example, through nature, right? So the topic of divine revelation has been a long-standing and central focus in theology, and philosophical discussions have often taken their cues from Christian theological debates, okay? But divine revelation, again, is an age-old notion that has been dealt with in many societies for millennia, right? But here it is, moral relativism, it's a breath. We just started dealing with this in the 20th century problem. We've been dealing with the idea of truth for millennia. We've been dealing with the idea of divine revelation for millennia. But now all of a sudden people are, again, rejecting the ancient path for this, talk about new age stuff. People have completely tossed aside the Torah. Because why? Relatively speaking, in morality, they want to do what they want to do. People don't want to be confined and restrained and self-controlled. So there's no way the truth can prevail in a society where people have no control, where people have no moral compass. There is no truth in a society where that exists. It can't exist. It's completely adversarial. The notion of truth is adversarial to a moral relativist. But this is the society that we are now being predominated by moral relativists. It's being predominant. And so we have to know how to navigate through these waters. We have to know. In fact, let me go here real quick. A couple passages before we go. I got to bring it full circle, of course. So in the 8th chapter of the Witness of John, Yeshua is dealing with people who are supposed to be teachers, who are supposed to know the absolute truth, right? But because of their moral relativism, they wanted to do what they wanted to do, they did not follow the truth. So, in fact, Yahushua was speaking words to those who believed him, and he said to those who did believe him in verse 31 of chapter 8, if you stay in my word, you are truly my taught ones, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But they answered him, we are the seed of Abraham and have been servants to no one at any time. How do you say you shall become free? Yeshua answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone doing sin is a servant of sin. This is a moral issue now. He took truth and put it back in a moral issue. You can't perceive the truth if you're in immorality, if you're in sin. And the servant does not stay in the house forever, a son does. If the son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. I know that you are the seed of Abraham, but you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you, right? So this is because the word in John 17, we're told, is the truth. The word of Yah is the truth. Keep them in your word, Abba. Your word is truth, is what Yahushua says in John 17. But this is a great matter. This is a very, very, and I will use the word salvific matter. This is really relative to the salvation of souls, whether or not you believe we have a soul or not. There's something that our souls and our being will actually have to come to reconcile. We're going to have to come to a reconciliation of our deeds one day, believe it or not. We're going to have to bring everything into account. There's going to be a reckoning, right? And so with that reckoning and the balance and restoration of truth and order, our souls are going to be weighed in the balance as well, because it has contributed to this cosmic reality we call existence. But in the book of Revelation, I'm going to start at the 22nd chapter and the 10th verse. The master again speaking, and he said to me, the angel speaking, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, the divine revelation, right? That's what prophecy is divine revelation of the will of heaven. Do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, because the time is near. He who does wrong, let him do more wrong. He who is filthy, let him be more filthy. He who is righteous, let him be more righteous. He who is set apart, let him be more set apart. And see, I am coming speedily, and my reward is with me, and to give each according to his work. The truth, right? This is what is the only thing you're supposed to say when you're on trial in court. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do. On the scriptures. On the scriptures, right? The truth is present in society. Continuing on. I am the Aleph, I am the first, and I am the Taw, the last, the beginning and the end, the first and last. Blessed are those doing his commands, so that the authority shall be theirs into the tree of life, and to enter through the gates into the city. But listen to this, verse 15, but outside are the dogs, and those who enchant with drugs, and those who whore, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and all who love and do falsehood. Moral relativism does fall into that category because it is not the truth. When we deal with the truth, we're dealing with biological truths. We're dealing with geological truths. We're dealing with, evidential truths. And that's what faith is all about. Faith is the substance of what is hoped for and the evidence of what is unseen. So when you're dealing with truth in spirit, you're dealing with substantial evidence. You're dealing with veracity. You're dealing with the pursuit of the truth based on the knowledge acquired, right, in your observations with life. And that's what spiritual matters all about. You can even call it sacred science. That's what sacred science is all about. We're just observing things spiritually now. And what has happened, when you deal with the scriptures, you got over 30 authors bearing witness to the same consciousness, culturally speaking. And even people from outside the culture speaking the same thing. And so when we're dealing with truth, we have to know that there is an absolute truth as well as there is a relative truth. But we have to understand everything is based on pattern and precedent and prototype. And that is what the absolute truth is all about. And that's what Shifting Paradigms wanted to express today. I'm B. Michael, your host. I want to thank you all for tuning in. We're going to be back in about 2 weeks' time. So today is the 2nd. So we'll be back, on the 16th, I do believe. And we will be proceeding from there. I want to thank Baba G for hosting us here tonight. Always doing his thing, keeping it up and holding it down. Appreciate you so much, Baba G. Appreciate my listeners. And we will continue forward from there. I'm going to have a sign-up page very soon. I'm about to start really launching some speaking initiatives around. So if you're needing a keynote speaker, somebody like that, a guest speaker, a motivational speaker, definitely, hit me up on the DM. And we can definitely make that happen and keep it moving forward from there. But this is B. Michael, your host here with Shifting Paradigms, signing off. Shalom, shalom.